Hello and welcome back to Many. I am doing my part 5 now, or hopefully, I think the last one in this series, taking a stab at Analytic Idealism, a consciousness-only ontology, which is a book by Bernardo Kastrup. And to recapture my approach here, it's I'm not going to make a deconstruction. That's why I call it scrutinization, right? Or scrutinizing. I search for particular terms that are essential to this abstract that is called a nutshell in the beginning of the book, and see if I can sort of extract those particular terms and the context they're used in the rest of the book, and then sort of get a grasp on what it's actually doing and whether it sort of makes sense to me, right? Or that if there's huge plot holes, or there are contradictions, or whatever, all sorts of problems that might make me think this is not particularly well argued. You could say maybe that even though, as I've said before, that philosophy is not what you present, that's the thinking you're trying to represent, you could say, right? So even if somebody is very bad at describing or representing their philosophy, it might actually be a good philosophy that they actually have, but you can never get to that then, right? So all I have is what he presents. And if that sort of stinks, well, then it's a stinker to me, right? So that's just my sort of low down and dirty, grounded approach to things, right? I have no patience with authoritarianism, right? This is a doctor. This one has a PhD, so you have to listen. You have to take it seriously, no matter how shitty it is. That doesn't fly, right? Obviously. Okay. I was way down at page, in the last one where I left off, page something very much, yes, 32, 33, something like that. And I did, in the last one, as you probably already is aware, that ontology was the search word. Now the search word is reduction. And I chose to do that because it's a recurring topic in his presentations, that he refers to what he calls a reduction base. And that is brilliant, in my opinion. That says that you are attempting, or at least wants to come across as somebody who's taking things step by step, right? You're trying to find a grounded anchor point from which the rest can follow, right? The problem is, though, that what he apparently reduces himself into is an imagination or an abstraction called mind or consciousness or whatever term he's using for it, right? The world and nature and, So, therefore, I would like to understand how he actually performs this reduction. What are the rules of reduction, right? The rules of engagement in reduction, right? So, and personally, I'm willing to be lectured on that, to be honest, right? I'm open for all kinds of suggestions of how you do a good reduction. Because what you are attempting to find a ground floor in the most neutral manner you can possibly do, because you don't want to find a bad reduction base, right? You want to get to the right reduction base, but basically you don't know what it is, right? And if you know what it is, you haven't scrutinized how you got to it if you haven't done the reduction yet, right? So if you think you have a base already, then you might just be confirmation biasing your way to that reduction base. You want to be the reduction base, right? So you have to come up with some kind of algorithm or a procedure for how you go about doing reduction to make sure that you don't just get what you want, right? And what would it look like? What is it? A category of some kind? Is it what is it? Right? And this ground level philosophy is difficult, not because of its inherent philosophy, but it's so prevalent. It's so easy to go wrong, right? It's like you're standing there and there are 1,200 different doors or more, an infinitude of doors, and you have to pick the right one to get to the reduction base, right? And there are all sorts of, hey, there's a fancy philosophy over here, and you can get to God here, and you can get to mummies right there, and, this makes you feel good if you have bad psychology and so on. You might want to take one of these doors because they sound nice, right? But that's not what you're doing when you're doing reduction, right? You're actually trying to avoid any fallacious intuition or something like that about where you should go, right? You want to get to the right reduction base, and you don't know if it's right, or you can't get to the correctness of it, right? So that's the difficulty. So it seems that if he has come up with the idea of a reduction base that is mind or consciousness, or whatever the term is, right? Then I would like to know how he got to it. It's not that I'm necessarily saying there's something incorrect about it, but in order for me to figure out if it's correct or valid or whatever term you want to put on it, I have to understand how he did it. So that's why I'm searching for reduction, because I want to understand the procedure he's using for doing that kind of reduction. So if I'm searching for that, it's obvious to me, at least, to search for the term reduction. If he's doing reduction somewhere in the text and he doesn't mention the term reduction, then he's trying to obscure it for me, right? Okay. Reduction. Under analytic idealism, on the other hand, they are to be expected if normal brain function is part of the intrinsic appearance of a dissociated alter. There's again this if. There are no ifs in an ontology. This is not a guessing game, right? That's not what you do when you do ontology. If you use an if, right? I guess it could be some up to the context it's being used in. But I would do anything to avoid the term if in my ontology. Because it basically says it would say that I don't know what I'm doing, right? Part of the extrinsic appearance of a dissociated alter of universal consciousness, right? A normal brain function is an abstraction. Extrinsic is an abstraction. Appearance is an abstraction. A dissociated alter is an abstraction. Universal is an abstraction, and consciousness is an abstraction, right? So, and if an abstraction is part of an extraction of another abstraction that is alter of an abstraction of an abstraction, well, I mean, fuck off, right? Then some forms of reduction or impairment of normal brain function. No, oh my God, man. He equivocates the term reduction here, right? Then some forms of reduction of impairment of normal brain function should be intrinsic appearance of a reduction of impairment of the dissociation. I should have highlighted the reduction there also, right? But, I had to look through them to highlight them, right? It was too cumbersome to search for it because the search highlighting disappeared when I started to highlight, and then I had to search again, and then I just did it visually, right? Okay, but he equivocates the term reduction as you're having less of whatever, some brain function, right? So of all the terms he could possibly equivocate, I understand that it's not an equivocation in the same context as you would. It's like, yes, I can use a term in this chapter to mean this in this context I'm dealing with in this chapter, and then 5 chapters later I'm going to use the same term but with a different meaning because this chapter is dealing with something different. Fair enough. But wouldn't it be a good idea to find another term than reduction? Of all the terms you could possibly create a equivocation, reduction is not one of them, right? Oh, man. Now, since brain activity is part of the extrinsic appearance of an alter's dissociated phenomenal states, it stands to reason that some, even most types of brain function impairment should correspond simply to a reduction of the phenomenon. Again, it's a different meaning of reduction we're having here. At the root of this concerning state of affairs, generalized failure to recognize that every step of explanatory abstraction away from the concreteness of conscious perception implies a reduction in epistemic confidence. Epistemic confidence! Your confidence of your knowledge is reduced. I really don't like this, right? There reduction. You don't get any way close to a equivocation of the term reduction in a dissertation or a elaboration on your ontology. You don't go about using reduction in another meaning. I would avoid that at all costs, right? Then I would avoid the term epistemology or epistemic, right, in my ontology, because I can only do epistemology when I've done all of my ontology and all of my potential metaphysics, right? And you don't have confidence. Yeah, you might have some confidence in your knowledge, but that's just your emotional abstraction from that knowledge. I have some confidence. So what? I mean, what is interesting is what you know and what you don't know, right? Well, if you have something you classify as knowledge, whether you have confidence in it is up to you. It has no bearing on somebody else, right? So it's completely fucking misguided, this, right? He's lost in his word salad, right? He's crawling around there in his big homemade philosophical word salad, and he's just sprinkling it with, dressing of vocabulary, all over the place, and he thinks it's so great, right? And it's just a frankenfuck of a salad, right? We do not know that abstract conceptual, and again, I might just cut it short and say, again, he uses reduction in this equivocated meaning, right? Okay. Further supporting the claim that abstracting away from direct experiences is implied a reduction in epistemic. So now it's also, you can both have a reduction in some brain function, but you can also have some reduction of some abstract thing. So it's a triple equivocation, this, right? In this sense, explanatory abstraction again implies reduction. There's the same. Appearances are, of course, phenomenal in nature. I shall thus call this interpretation idealist cosmopsychism, since its reduction base is purely phenomenal. Okay, but that's just a claim, that's not an explanation. Or a definition of what he means by reduction. Clarification, careful to choose the right word here, right? Some kind of settlement, what he means by reduction, and how it unfolds when he does it to get to his reduction base, right? That's what I'm interested in. The goal is to account for all relevant facts with cosmic consciousness alone in the reduction base. Okay, again, that's the result, that's not the effort, right? A neuroimaging study revealed that experienced mediums displayed marked reduction of activity. Now it's using it in equivocated meaning. As such, the significant self-transcending experiences that follow psychedelic intake accompanied by reduction in brain activity. Again, it's not what I'm looking for. As such, it is difficult to see why a reduction in oxygen, not what I'm looking for. If one is to make and talk about philosophy, it is unavoidable to frame one's thoughts and discourse in terms of space-time extension. I guess. Because you're describing your experience, right? For the true analytic idealist, or if you are a true believer, right? If you're not a heathen, or these fake believers, fake followers, right? You are a part of the cult, right? The true cultist, right? This is admittedly a concession, for space-time is not in the idealist reduction base. The assertion made thus ultimately, okay, there's no explanation of what he means by reduction, right? Recent neuroimaging, form of reduction of neural activity. Again, it's about that reduction as in less and less and less, right? Every day I love you less and less. Da, 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 da. This dissertation elaborates on a modern, oh yes, there we have this nice philosophical term called modern, right? That's just a knockdown word. Simply modern, you have to listen, right? You have to take it seriously then, right? Of the ontology of idealism, according to which a phenomenal consciousness as an ontological category is fundamental and everything else against this. I have seen this one in when I search for idealism, I think, right? Or maybe also other stuff. Ontology. It's a recurring sentence, this one, right? But it's also this phenomenal consciousness as an ontological category. Okay, so there are more than one category then, right? But if it's a consciousness only ontology, how can there be more than one category? Because everything is then consciousness. It's consciousness only, right? But then it doesn't say consciousness as the ontological category. And then he's just scrapped the idea of category because there is only one, so you don't need categories, right? But then he says everything else in nature. How can you write this stupid shit and have that title of your book? I mean, it's incredible to me, right? It posits a reduction base consisting of but don't posit it. Argue for it. It's not about coming up with shit and try to defend it, right? It's argue rigidly for it, doing the reduction, showing how it's done, so that I can follow and say, yeah, he's on the beat there, right? He's on the money. But he just say, I'm going to posit this, and I'm going to defend it with my life and my philosophical shield. It's like, fuck you, man, right? Okay, so, and of course, from a first-person perspective, a reduction of dissociation must be experienced. Okay, so now reduction is being used in this equivocated meaning, right? And there's nothing further. This is what we've got, right? This is what we've got. So it's let me bring. I forgot to put something on the plate here. I was screwing around with my streaming recorder and I changed a few things and I forgot to put something up here that I ought to have put up, and I'll just do it quickly. If I can find it. Every day I love you less and less. Something I detest. Do. What the hell is going on here? Okay, I think we've got it here. And this is just a basic notepad text I wrote here, right? It was actually some note, but I'll just bring it up. And having done the search through the book now, right? To sort of recapture it a bit. I'll get back to these notes, right? But it's I don't find this to be. I find it to be basically the opposite of convincing. I find it something I should be very careful about this, right? Because I feel that I'm being manipulated. I basically feel that he's screwing around with my mind, trying to get things his way, right? He's interested in making sure I just believe what he tells me, but not necessarily that I am understanding what he's trying to say. As I pointed out, that if you are raising the Lix number for your text, you're trying to impress somebody, right? But you're not trying to impress those who are falling off the wagon because they don't really get what the fuck you're saying. So you're sort of pissing on the average person who wants to maybe understand this. But what you're trying to do is actually just impress your academic friends, right? You want to be a part of the big club of academics, right? And be, invited to the next, seminar with David Chalmers or whatever, right? You want to see yourself in the club of thinkers, but it's sort of half arrogant, you could say, right? It's not concerned about the little people. As long as the academics and the power structures and so on, they respect me, I'm fine, because I need to make a living or whatever, right? But it also suffers from all these problems that I'm trying to point out, even though I haven't read the complete book, right? And do it in this kind of approach. And I suspect that he would want me to do it this way if I can't help doing it. He would probably want me to go the fuck away and not try to scrutinize his writing, right? But he would have to say, of course, he likes it because he has to be, extended an idea of being open for criticism. But he would probably find, in order to criticize me, right, if he were to do that, he would find some ad hominem attack that he's kind of weird, right? He doesn't have a PhD. He is this, he is that. The way he speaks, he's angry. He's probably toxic, right? It's almost me too, right? He's raping. He is raping my text. Oh, man. Okay. This is sort of my generalized thoughts about what you're actually doing when you're doing ontology, right? And I said, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Hope you can still follow the text. I hope. Okay. I need to little less. Let's see. Okay. Let's stay there. What there is, that's ontology. What there is not, therefore not, I have come up with something, right? What there is might allude to, but what is everything? Is there something beyond what I have experienced? That is also an is. No, I don't think so, because then you are screwing around with the categories, right? I have to keep things separated. What there is maybe should be rephrased to a clarification, classification, and interdependencies of my phenomena. Something like that, right? As I've written here, categorization of your phenomena. Finding a reduction base has to be a category of your phenomena, right? if you have said, okay, I have these phenomena, in order to describe this ontologically, I have to find some lower level unit to describe the rest of my phenomena with, right? Otherwise, it's still just phenomena. It's in order to create some structure and so on and so on and so on. Therefore, there's this idea of a reduction base. And the reduction base, in my opinion, but it might change. I can't promise you, right, that it won't. But to me, it has to be, if there are more than one category within your ontology, or maybe that's circular. That is circular. I can't argue that. I have to find an approach to how I do my reduction. I can't have any categories, actually, because that would entail that I have an ontology, right? So, when I've done the reduction, that reduction base, I would say, has to be defined or classified as a category. It's a subset of all the phenomena then, right? At least. I would call it a category. If your reduction base isn't a category in itself, it sounds to me like you haven't done a sufficiently rigid kind of reduction. It has to be something kind of special, that reduction base, right? So I would make it a category. That's how I should put it, right? And then you build further categories from that reduction base by only referring to the prior category or categories, depending on how many you have, right? You can't just come up with a new category out of the blue. If you've done a reduction base, then the next category has to be completely described using that prior category, which is in the first step is your reduction base, right? Otherwise, you're just fucking around. Then you're structuring the rest of your phenomena from that base, as I said, right? Okay. So, in other words, ontology is a solipsist endeavor, right? You cannot bring anything given. You cannot bring anything. I'm just bringing this along from my old thinking, right? When you're doing a reduction base and ontology, you're basically wiping the slate clean and saying I'm throwing everything out, right? Or at least I'm reducing my way to just keeping one thing, which is that starting category, right? And then I rebuild the rest of my phenomena from that. That you can only do, obviously, in a solipsist environment, you could say, right? You can't then just turn around. Hey, by the way, I had an experience 2 days ago. I read this paper that says this, that, and the other. You can't do that. You can't bring it along. You can, as I said here, there are nothing basically you can bring along. There is no imagination you can bring along, because that's one of the phenomena you're possibly going to reduce away from you, right? No other philosophy, no presuppositions. There's no epistemology, obviously, or ethics for that matter, right? If you wanted to bring ethics for some reason into ontology, right? There's no science. There is no other realm. There's no external world, right? There's nothing but your phenomena. And you're reducing your way down through these phenomena to the reduction base, which is a particular category of your phenomena, right? He does nothing of this. He just have this big bowl gumbo of an infinite number of imaginations and abstractions. He's just going to, throw up in the air and cherry pick whatever he wants, right? Then metaphysics comes after establishing that ontology, right? Metaphysics is, first of all, and you can maybe even say that starting to talk about an ontology, talking about an external world to your phenomena is the last step away from ontology. If you do that, then you're saying, now I'm stopping ontology. Now I'm going into metaphysics, right? What is beyond or above or before or behind physics, right? Because you wouldn't talk about that external if there wasn't some starting point that you are wondering about whether or not there's something beyond it, right? If you didn't have that starting point, which is what you're describing in your ontology, then you wouldn't talk about an external world, because that would basically be nothing then, right? And there wouldn't be any philosophy. I wouldn't be sitting here and so on, right? So obviously a metaphysics has to be based in some kind of ontology, and that ontology has of course to be completely done and finished and settled and scrutinized and so on, right? Then you might venture into, okay, my last step of the last question I had in my ontology was, maybe there's something beyond my ontology, so to say, right? At that point, you're venturing into metaphysics. Then it's no longer ontology. But the problem is that when you are stepping out of ontology, you are making a imagined leap. It's an imagination. You're questioning yourself into imagination. You are not saying, oh, I have this phenomena over here. No, you have a phenomena which is your imagination of an external world. That imagination of an external world is still an imagination. It's still a phenomena. Just because you have a phenomena that imagines an external world potentially doesn't mean that external world all of a sudden popped out of nowhere because you imagined it, right? That would be the same as saying that Santa Claus can be popped into existence just because you wanted to, right? So therefore, it's metaphysics has to be classified as something purely imaginary. And therefore, the only thing you can do is say, I can't rule out that there's something beyond my phenomena. But at the same time, there is no fucking way I can go and give you any kind of ontology of what it is. Right? Of what there is. Because basically metaphysics is the ontology of an external world, right? It's purely imaginary. All I'm hearing when I hear people talk about that metaphysics or that ontology of an external world are their abstractions of some kind that they just project into an external world as if they can just do that. I am not buying that, because if you have an idea of it, if you have a phenomena of it, and imagination is also a phenomena, then it's a part of your ontology, right? Obviously. But if it wasn't a part of your ontology, you weren't having the phenomena, so you wouldn't be talking about it, right? In this sort of weird, almost circular thing. It's only by axiom that you can decide that there is an external world, and that's all. You can't go any further, because you are imagining it. You are not experiencing an external world for good reasons, because you can't, right? So if it's imagined, that's the last step, because any further step would be another imagination upon an imagination. I'm not buying that. So what you can do, the last step before your philosophy stops, is I cannot rule out there is an external world, therefore I am working from the axiom that there is an external world that I cannot get to, because there is no way for me to go there, just like Immanuel Kant would have said, right? But the one thing I can't do is, though particular aspects that is not my reduction base, but some other category of my experiences, of my phenomena, I can treat as representation of an external world. right? There's nothing that hinders me. That's just, you would say, that is also an axiom. I would very much go with you in that direction. But if you have better arguments, let me hear it, right? You're working from the axiom that these are representation of an external world. It might not sound like there's a big difference, but there is. Because if you say, I have access to an external world, you basically just become another materialist. It's just a different kind of terms you're using for that external world you believe you have some kind of access to, right? That was exactly why you potentially became this kind of idealist, because you rejected that paradox that is inherently built into the understanding of materialism or physicalism, right? So, only by axiom. No ontology possible, obviously, in metaphysics, right? Okay, so when you're dealing with somebody else's and your own ontology for that matter, right? Look out for wishful thinking, right? I would really like the way this great philosopher's mind is going, right? Oh, it leads to this. Oh my God, it's so, oh man, right? That's not an argument. Caught up in abstractions, right? The in-sperience, or from my ontology, right, becomes an external world. It's like, yeah, there are tomatoes, there are colors, but abstractions of universal, unbound, conscious mind, whatever, right? All these, abstractions, conglomeration of abstractions upon abstractions, all of a sudden almost comes alive as an external world, right? Be careful. A narrative, for instance, oh, it fits with the bullshit mommy force-fed me, right? Mommy was, a socialist. Yes, she's a single mother. And if I don't have this ontology, it will lead to where I have to reject mother's bullshit. I don't like it, mommy. Right? Careful. Psychology. It makes me feel good, right? It's a mental safe space. When I have this ontology, it gives me a description of a world I want to live in, right? I don't care about these boring tomatoes and bicycles, right? I want to live in my mental cloud castle because it makes me feel good. The big, mind daddy takes care of me. I don't have my anxiety anymore when I'm in my bias, right? An undisclosed proto-ontology, as I said here, right? And that sounds a little fancy. Well, let me explain. When you are biased, you are bringing in preconceived ideas of what it should be, right? So you're basically sort of saying, yes, now I'm starting fresh with a new ontology, but I have a backpack full of my old ontology. I'm bringing and just slapping onto my new, putting new labels on old wine, right? Doesn't work. Okay, be careful with all these problems like circularity, which is inherently a problem in all ontology, right? Contradictions, equivocations, right? Bad meta-philosophy, right? You don't really have a method or a procedure for doing this thing, right? Just throwing fancy words around is not going to crack it, mate, right? So have some idea what you allow yourself to do and maybe also describe it, right? I'm not saying it's going to be easier to do an ontology, but you have to have some rules for yourself. You can't just equivocate words, right? It's a bad idea. Contradicting yourself, for instance, right? And all these circularities, right? Which is also maybe a result of all the other problems to look out for, wishful thinking, caught up in abstractions, or, your psychology and your biases and so on, right? And this is how you find them. I mean, if somebody wants to sell you a car and it has two wheels and, a teapot out on the front, it might work in some sense, right? I mean, it might, in some freaky way, it might make you able to get from A to B somehow, right? But I'm not going to fucking trust it, right? It's like, I have to judge somehow whether or not this is worth my time. I don't have for fucking forever to do this, right? It's also a problem, which a recent video that Essentia Foundation and Bernardo Kastrup aired yesterday, I think, right? Well, it's just one and a half hour of word babble, right? Just, not sort of halfway narcissistic, I'm so great kind of, it gets more and more sort of homey, sort of armchair, feel-good philosophy of some kind. I don't buy any of it at this point, right? But he explicitly says, no, he's not an ethical philosopher, right? Tapping into, confirming my ideas that when you leave the real world and go into metaphysics, you don't care about epistemology or ethics anymore, right? Because you're staying in that weird cloud castle. And that's what I'm hearing. He's saying, oh no, don't ask me about ethics. No, I don't. I'm not interested in that. I'm a metaphysician or something like that, right? And then he sort of, a few minutes later, he proceeds to lecture you about evil and you shouldn't do this and you should do that, right? Moron, man, right? But if you don't want to bring this further, epistemology and ethics, you're basically saying, I'm not going to check whether or not this motor will work in my car. I have spent 10 years building a motor, but I'm not going to test it in my car. Are you crazy? No, that's for somebody else to, fuck you, man, right? Build a fucking motor, put it in a fucking car, and show me it works for you, right? Build an ontology, then establish some epistemology and a definition of knowledge, and then go and do some ethics to come up with a moral principle or something similar, and then tell me how it works, right? Show it to me. Otherwise, why the fuck would I give any? Because there's no checkpoint for whether or not this actually works in any kind of real world that I'm living in, right? Because it has to be the whole deal. You have to be a completist to be a real philosopher, in my opinion. You can't just have your little pet subject, right? That is never going to be connected with the rest of what I need as a human being, with the need of a complete philosophy in order to go about my everyday in what I would consider a non-immoral manner, right? So if you're so fucking smart, why don't you connect the dots? Do some fucking epistemology and some ethics. If you're this smart, I have 16 PhDs and why don't you do it? Are you afraid what you might find, right? In the depths of, Moria, the fire demon is still lurking, right? You don't want to dig that deep, right? So, what can I say? I have no patience with this guy, right? It's a load of bullshit. It's just glorified bullshit, right? To make himself feel good. And he has been shanghaied by this billionaire Fred Mazza, who's probably want to hide his money in some foundations, just like the Clinton Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and so on, right? And then virtue signal about it while he does it, and keeps his money out of the taxpayers, away from the other taxpayers, right? The poor little people who are working night shift and so on, who has to pay 45% tax, they can't hide their money in a foundation, right? And then Shanghai did this little sad, little pathetic, weirdo philosopher dude, right? Who has mommy and daddy issues and suffers from, hypochondria and anxiety and all sorts of illnesses and tinnitus and what? I want normal, and he takes drugs and I don't know what, right? And brain fucking himself with psychedelia, what the fuck it is, right? That dude is not going to lecture me on how to live my life, right? Understand my ontology. And I'm not buying it, right? It's a kind of corruption. And it's also I think there's a tendency to those who tend to get the most say in philosophy are those who are most crazy, right? Because they're crazy enough to believe the shit they're telling themselves, right? They don't have sufficient clarity. They don't have sufficient scrutiny. They don't have sufficient skepticism, right? Or self-criticism. But they are cushioning whatever imagined life they want to live through this philosophy. And it's clear to me that that's what he does. Because he stops with his metaphysics and says, done, that's all I need. Then I feel good about myself, right? I'm not going to do epistemology, right? And ethics. No, I want to lecture people about this, that, and the other. You should do this and you shouldn't do that. And Trump is bad and Putin is bad as Putin Hitler, right? But I don't, no, I'm not doing any epistemology or any ethics. No, I have my metaphysics. I have my ripples and my mind daddy, right? So why would I need to do stupid peasant philosophy like that, right? It's fucking arrogant. It's fucking arrogant, man, right? Okay. Enough of that. Please stay, like, and subscribe. Let me have your comment. Please consider donation for my extremely hard work here, right? Pouring my heart out, right? And I hopefully I can give some criticism to whatever is a prevailing movement of whatever philosophy at the moment and sort of pull them down to size, right? I like to do that, mostly for my own concern, but if you are inspired, well, so, the more the merrier, right? But let me know what you think. Was this something that rubbed you the right way? And do you want to see more of this? Have I made any circular reasonings? Let me know. What do you think of my ontology? You can watch as a spin-off from that. You can watch my series Ontology I did last week and the week before maybe, to get a grasp on how I approach it, or at least how I approach it at this point. It might change in the future, who knows? But beyond that, have a nice day. See you in the next one.